Hello, YouTubers! Welcome to Big Buddha is Watching. I'm Big Buddha, and today I'm going to be looking at Top of the Lake, which is a series that, the second series has just aired on the BBC, and to be honest, it wasn't really a series. I don't think I'd have watched it unless Amy suggested it, and I thought, yeah, okay. But I mean, right from the get go, I was hooked, and we ploughed through all 12 episodes. We 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 actually it was actually series two that was up on the iPlayer, which is what she suggested watching, and I said, well, I'm sure this is on Netflix. So we went through, and sure enough, if you're going to watch it, series one is on Netflix, series two is on the iPlayer at the moment. Series two is actually called China Girl, or Top of the Lake China Girl, hence the long-winded title of this video. But watch Top of the Lake first, and it'll give you a much better understanding. Don't go into series two blind, because there's a lot that happens in series one that really needs to be covered first. I'm a little biased going in, because right from the get go I was hooked from the opening credits, when the credit co-written by Jane Campion, directed by Jane Campion, came up, and I was like, oh, brilliant, because Jane Campion is a director who has never failed to impress me. Admittedly, I've only ever seen two films of hers, An Angel at My Table and The Piano, both of which blew me away when I first watched them. But I watched them about probably over 20 years ago now, back in the mid-90s. And she's one of these directors that I've always meant, every now and again, like sort of every year or couple of years, I often think, wow, those films both blew me away. I really should seek out something else that she's done, more of the director's work, but never have. so to my mind, like, Jane Campion has 100% success rate with me so far. Maybe that view will be jaded if I seek out more of her work, but today I've just been impressed by everything that I've seen that she's done. I may do The Piano actually as my next review. That's been sitting on my DVD shelf now, unwatched for a while now. Like I said, I did watch it back in the 90s after it. I think it won Best Picture back in '93. And I remember being greatly impressed by it, but I'm now keen to. I'll probably do this tonight. Actually, go back and revisit that film and give you my thoughts on it in the next video. So, Jane Campion, greatly impressed by her work, and hooked me from the opening credits with that in mind. But Top of the Lake is basically a New Zealand set police procedural. Jane Campion's a New Zealand director, starring Elizabeth Moss as Robin, who's a DI. She's newly returned from living in Sydney for a few years, and as the series progresses, more and more revelations about the history of her character emerges. She's had an awful past, to put it mildly. Straight away when she gets back, she gets caught up in an investigation for trying to find a missing girl called Tui, an Asian Australian girl, daughter of Peter Mulligan, who may or may not have been murdered. So yeah, that's the basic plot of the series. That the first six episodes sort of based around, and I call it a police procedural, but really it's just a drama series about various shady types who live out in the backwoods of New Zealand, and the police characters, and also there's a subplot going on with Holly Hunter, who plays this very mysterious character who just goes by the name GJ, who set up a kind of hippie commune retreat on Peter Mulligan's backyard, much to his chagrin, because he says he's sort of the ultimate alpha male in this story, and but it's a retreat for fallen women, and she plays this very mysterious character. She looks a little bit like Jane Campion in real life. She has this wonderful mane of completely white hair, despite her age, and she makes a reference early on to being dead, basically, but dead and yet still living, and that's very much how she plays it. She's almost got these. It's a wonderful performance from Hunter. She's got these almost dead eyes, and you get the sense here. All the characters in this, especially the female characters, are damaged in some way, but you get the sense of the GJ that something awful has happened in the past, and it's never revealed throughout the entire story. And I like that. I like the enigmatic quality of this character. She's very mysterious and wise and philosophical, and not almost nihilistic in a way. She's not quite what you'd expect from a sort of Svengali leader. Whenever she sees anybody meditating, she shouts at them, to almost screams at them to snap out of it and live in the moment, live in the real world. Don't deal with your problems the way hippies do. So like The Wire, which is a comparison I'm going to make throughout this, because it did remind me of The Wire. That might be an odd comparison to anybody who's watched The Wire or and Top of the Lake, but because it only reminded me of The Wire in the sort of in its audacity and its approach to the drama, in that The Wire on the surface looked just like a cop show, but really was just a drama series in which the central characters, some of them happen to be police officers, and but it was really a way to look at their lives and examine social issues, really. And this is very much the same. Although it's a police procedural, it's really an excuse to look at some very dark subject matter. In particular, it's what's referred to, I saw in the Wikipedia entry and by some critics, as rape culture. Rape is very much at the forefront in this. A lot of the characters are rape victims. Men going in, don't expect your gender to be portrayed in a particularly good light, because men do not come across very well in this series. They're all either portrayed as rapists, whether they're sort of outwardly rapist, or the more subtle sort of form of rape where sexual abuse, where you almost don't really realise that it's that it's abuse that we're carrying out. But the series is very good at highlighting the awful things that men do, and certainly after watching we marathoned pretty much the first series in one go, and afterwards I did not feel good about being a man afterwards. I was sort of, everything I was even said after that to Amy, I was sort of second guessing myself all the time, thinking, oh, is that is that wrong? Is that me stamping my dominance and over the two of us in our relationship? Am I wrong in my attitudes? There's no right or wrong answer, obviously, like any questions posed in art, but uh, also in art, I think it's good to ask these questions once in a while, and to if a piece of art, if a piece of television can cause you to question your own outlook, then that can only be a good thing. Um, there's there, there's some absolutely incredible performances in this. Peter Mulligan, who I mentioned before, I've seen him in one or two other things, and I know that he can be very, very scary on screen, and this is no exception. He's the perfect choice to play the villain of something, because he's, especially in a realistic drama, because he's very, very convincing as the ultimate alpha male and the leader of the pack, and he's sort of almost Neanderthal in his or prehistoric in his sort of dominance over the especially the women, and most of the men in this story. Um, Odd in a way that he was cast. I guess he must have been cast purely on the fact of what a good actor he is, and how much he inhabits this role, because he plays it with his own accent. He plays it with a Scottish accent, and I can only assume, because it's never actually referenced at any point, that the fact that he's Scottish, or what his backstory is. Why he lives in New Zealand. So I can only assume that the character was originally written for a Kiwi actor, but when you have an actor of Peter Mulligan's caliber in the role, it's really unimportant that. Because the way the story plays out, he must have lived in New Zealand for a long time. There's references to things that happened 20, 25 years previously, and certainly his mother is, at one point, you find out he's buried in the woods in there. So he must have lived in New Zealand, in Top Lake, for a long time, but never lost his accent. I can only assume that I don't know if he ever made any attempt at a New Zealand accent, and they just said no. In the end, just do it as in your own voice. But I mean, it's unimportant. It's in the end, because he is. He is everything that the character needs to be. He's scary and he's awful, and you hate him at first, and then you kind of get to like him at some points, but just because of the humanity that Mulligan injects into him. But then he'll go and do something equally awful, in the next scene, and you have to sort of almost kick yourself for liking the character. Don't be don't be fooled. He is the villain of the piece through and through. Typical chauvinist male. I'm starting by praising the male actors. I should be starting, of course, by talking about the central protagonist, played by Elizabeth Moss, Robin. She's also very, very compelling. I love her in Mad Men. I think she's a very, very good actress, and this, she's equally compelling and good in a way that she's got her own series, and she finally gets the chance to be the central protagonist of something, because you really do root for the character. It seems at points in the story that you know, the odds are stacked against her. She's, like I say, she's gone through some awful experiences in her life, and you'd think that you know, society would be sympathetic to this character, and yet they're not. You know, there's always suspicion and from her contemporaries and her peers who she works with, and she's viewed with contempt for doing the right thing. And Elizabeth Moss, you know, really anchors the series, and she's kind of the moral centre. You know, she is the audience's point of view to this awful society that she finds herself in, and yeah, Elizabeth Moss, yeah, she does a great job. Also, I have to mention David Wenham, who's a character who you're never quite sure throughout the series until the end, really, whether you should be rooting for him or not, or is he a good guy, or is he? Are you being misled? Is she into thinking he is? Is he going to? He's one of those, you know. He's either going to be a villain in the end, or he's going to come good. And genius stroke of casting David Wenham, who of course I love as Faramir, and he was one of the only reasons really to watch the Iron Fist series on Netflix this year. He can play awful, but he can play it with such charm, and almost a wry sense of humour that's that yeah, he's just great. This series reunites a lot of people. It's like that who have worked with Campion before. It's almost like she was calling in some favours, you know, because you have Holly Hunter, you know, Hollywood's own Holly Hunter, playing GJ at the centre. And you also have, I know she wanted to cast Anna Paquin as because Elizabeth Moss plays the role with an Australian accent. So you were going to have a bit of a piano reunion there. You also have Genevieve Lemon as Bunny, who's is one of my favourite characters in the series. She's an nymphomaniac, basically. That's why she's at the retreat. She's there to find some sort of therapy to cope with her nymphomania. And there's some funny scenes with her in this. She's worked with Campion before. She was in, I think the film's called Sweetie, her first film, which I remember seeing probably about 10 minutes of on Channel 4 years and years ago. Of course, the thing that struck me at the time was I knew Genevieve Lemon from she was Brenda in Neighbours, and she was also Rabbit in Prisoner Cell Block H. I was like, that's Rabbit. Yeah, Prisoner Cell Block H is my guilty pleasure. We all have a guilty pleasures. Mine just happens to be late 70s, early 80s melodrama about big butch women, slightly lazy women being very mean to each other. We're all got to unwind somewhere. Some very compelling scenes in this, you know, really well directed, as you'd expect from Campion. She directs the violence in this, you know, it's hard to watch it at points because it's so realistic whenever there's violence on the screen, and the way it's written as well. She co-wrote this with a writer friend who I believe she wrote Sweetie with, called Gerard Lee, and the way they stage each scene is it's so compelling to watch because you never know the story's really unpredictable, and you never know where it's going to go, and you know it from right from the get go. This is one of those where the drama can take you in any direction. You know, you can. Even at the start of every scene, you sort of you almost get a sense of dread that because you, the way the story progresses, characters at the start of one scene can be in a very different spot in a very different place by the end of the scene, and it's one of those ones where you really have to almost psych yourself up to watch, you know, because you become fond of certain characters, and you don't want to see anything truly awful happen to them, and there are some truly awful things that happen, unfortunately, in this series. Some gorgeous New Zealand scenery, as you'd expect. You know, this is imagine an episode of Taggart with Lord of the Rings production values. That's aesthetically what the series looks like. And you know, as I said before, it presents itself as a police procedural, but that really it only uses the format of the police procedural, the detective program, as as a way to discuss feminist issues. But don't go in thinking you'll be disappointed if thriller fans you're thinking, oh, well, that doesn't sound my thing, you know. I just like a very straight laced detective story. You know, this film does deliver on the detective story aspect. You know, there are amidst the scenes of where you have to really think to read between the lines and the subtext. There are all the thriller beats, you know. You do get chase scenes and you know, trying to beat the clock bit scenes, beat the killer to the punch scenes, and it does all build to a very satisfying conclusion in the end. That's all I'm going to say on that front. I thought series one of Top of the Lake was fantastic. I think it's the best police procedural I've seen since The Wire, and I absolutely love The Wire. It's and so it gets very high praise from me. Series two, like I say, it's billed as Top of the Lake : China Girl. I think it really should be called just China Girl, because series two set a year or two later. Robin's kind of traumatized by the events of the first series, and she wants to get back to work. But she's had some time off, and you can see. At the start of series two, she's very much a damaged character. Sequels. I mean, sequels are never as good as the original. Well, not never, but more often than not. Not that this is bad, but it doesn't quite live up to the first series, in my opinion. Sadly, you get Nicole Kidman's in the second series. Nicole Kidman's another Campion stalwart. I think she made a film called Portrait of a Lady, and back in sort of '97 with Campion, and she's in this. I'm guessing playing a character kind of based on Campion's own experiences. I wouldn't like to put words in Campion's mouth on that front, but that's only a guess on my part. It's fun seeing Kidman actually play an Australian character again after a couple of decades of playing US characters. Almost to the point that Amy didn't even realise that. Kidman is an Australian actress, and she was wondering how they managed to get her for this. So, um, but she does a very good job. She plays a woman who uh, kind of has connections to Robin in the past. The plot of this one is Robin is investigating. They found the body of an Asian girl washed up on the shore of Bondi Beach, and that leads her down the road of investigating a brothel there, and where the girl worked, and China Girl's what the police dub her. She's assisted on the way by what's her name? Brienne of Tarth from Game of Thrones. Gwendoline Christie. She's great in series 2. She is very 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 funny. She plays a character you kind of think, is she a bit of a numpty? She's in the end she turns out to be not quite as stupid as you think earlier on, but just a very good performance, but a very funny performance, but not overly comedic. The humour kind of it comes from the writing. Really, it's such a really well realised character, and she's kind of the comic relief, but the comic, not in a kind of Rob Schneider way. It's a sophisticated comedy relief character, and I really liked her because she wasn't afraid to look a bit stupid. The central villain in this, he's he's unfortunately not as compelling as Mulligan in series 1, but that was a tough act to follow. Sure. The themes this time around really are about child loss. Every character in this has either lost or will lose a child. The subplot of this series is Robin being reunited with her daughter, who she's been estranged with from birth. She was a teenage mother because of events that were alluded to in series 1. And over the course of the narrative, a lot of the characters will either lose children or some way, or be reconciled with their children. And it's all set against the backdrop of the Asian sex trade, which is, I imagine, must be rife in Oz. And it also deals with themes of surrogacy as well, and the moral implications of having somebody else's children and rearing somebody else's children, and the downfalls really of the ultimate nightmare of the every parent's nightmare. I'd say is played out in China Girl, and it's fascinating and compelling to watch. I'm going to spoil the ending slightly by saying the villain gets away. I'm only saying that because it reminded me, this being series 2, it reminded me that that's how series 2 of The Wire ended, with the villain ultimately escaping without facing prosecution. And so I'm imagine now. I really am. If they do any more of these, I mean, the next series isn't going to be forthcoming anytime soon, I don't think, because series 1 was 2013, so we had to wait 4 years for series 2. I just happened to watch them all in the space of a week. I imagine there'll be a long wait for a third series, but I'm happy to wait. I'm always happy to wait when the quality is this good, you know, because sometimes the quality of something can depend on a long gestation period, a long development period, and if that's what it takes to produce something to rival The Wire, in my opinion, in quality, then I'm happy to wait another 4 years for season three. And if they're going to try and emulate the Wire that way, I mean that's a noble thing to live up to, in my opinion. Um, so yeah, that's all I'm going to say on Top of the Lake / China Girl. If you haven't seen it, I mean, if you're watching this, sort of, and I've uploaded it recently, the series 2 is available on the BBC iPlayer at the moment, but I imagine it will probably be available on Netflix pretty soon. Top of the Lake is series 1 is available on on Netflix now, and I urge anyone to go and watch it because it's one of the most compelling pieces of drama that I've seen in a long, long while. I was very, very impressed by it. And join me next time for my review of The Piano, which I say I will probably watch now for the first time in about 20 years and see if it's as compelling now as it was back then. So until then, folks, this is me, Big Buddha, signing off, and I shall see you all out there in YouTube land.